Good Vibrations.
And it is welcome back to Good Vibrations, this time around to a previous guest. It's been a minute, quite a few years since we last chatted. It's welcome back to Leila Wills over there in Chicago. Leila, welcome.
Hi, Mark. Thanks so much for having me today.
No worries. I was trying to work out how long it is since we last spoke, and it was certainly prior to all the COVID nonsense, so it must be at least 5 years.
Yeah, I believe you're right. I believe it had to be around 2019 or something.
I think it was. Well, no shortage of things to talk about today. We definitely want to get into all the P Diddy, Puff Daddy business, or the allegations that are very much in the news at the moment following his arrest. He's being referred to as the Jeffrey Epstein of hip-hop, which is not a particularly flattering title, because of the activities that he's alleged to have been involved in, befriending the rich, famous and powerful, getting them into compromising positions at his freak-off sex parties, we're told, and then using the filmed evidence for blackmail and leverage, it would seem. So I guess you've been all over this story since it first broke.
I am glued to this story and spent a number of years working in the music business in New York. And even before that, I was just a huge fan of hip hop. You know, I'm from Chicago, so our hometown, one of our music genres would be house music, which is really big in Chicago and was when I was coming up as a teenager. But when hip hop came out, I loved it instantly and eventually ended up working in the business. And so before Puffy, you have the whole era of Tupac and all of that, which is when Puffy became relevant with that whole East Coast, West Coast situation. So he had become an icon in hip hop. Yeah. And you already know how this overshadows the Afrika Bambaataa story.
Oh, for sure. We want to get into the Bambaataa story because, well, nobody else is, it seems. And it is all connected. We were talking about Bambaataa back in 2016 when that story broke. And I think the common denominator here is just the sleaze and the filth and the depravity that seems to be all throughout the hip hop business. And it's very disappointing and dispiriting for people like us because I used to be a hip hop fan. I was a DJ. I also worked in the industry on radio and such. And it's just so disappointing seeing all these figures that have been held up as heroes of the scene just being involved in all this absolute disgusting behavior.
You know, hip hop actually escaped the Me Too movement. Okay. When the Afrika Bambaataa story broke in 2016, it was 1 year before the Me Too movement. And it was totally ignored when the Me Too movement did hit in 2017 by Alyssa Milano, who did a tweet with the hashtag Me Too. And we later found out that that was already an established organization by a woman from the Bronx. But anyway, it took form on the internet and it was totally ignored. And I even talked to the people at the Me Too movement and they just totally ignored the Afrika Bambaataa situation. I bring that up because what's relevant is how and why hip hop escaped the Me Too movement and why we're seeing what we're seeing now, which is hip hop's own outing or expose into the debauchery that's going on in hip hop by executives and other powerful people.
Right.
And it's because it's a double-edged sword. So when you think of hip hop, you think of a Black dominated genre. And the crimes that were happening were against primarily Black women and Black underage boys and girls, so children. And these are the historically marginalized voices in the country, in America. And so they didn't get that same attention. Now, if you were a victim of someone powerful and you were a Black person, you then had to go up against, okay, it's already bad when these abusers like a Catholic priest or these figures are always beloved members of society and others don't know their other side. So when you have to consider going up against someone like this, they're already a beloved member. But what's added on in the Black community, being a minority in the country and our history in the country, now you'll be accused of trying to tear down a Black man, trying to destroy a successful Black man. And now you're working for the oppressor, you're working for the enemy. And those two things combined are enough to silence most voices. What I also learned during this whole thing is that survivors and victims, they do stay quiet until and unless there is some kind of chance, and I don't want to say everybody, but you know what I'm saying, until there's some kind of indication that there will be some accountability, whether that's law enforcement, whether someone will be fired, or whatever it is. And if you notice in this case of Puffy, P. Diddy, Cassie is not a Black woman. So she didn't have that mental and psychological baggage when she filed her lawsuit. I'm not saying she had none. I mean, we all have our issues, and she was definitely being abused by him. But I'm saying she didn't have that additional, you're trying to tear down a Black man psychology to deal with.
Right. Yeah, you make some very good points there. I've been hearing about Puffy's debauchery for decades, not even years. You know, back in the 90s, there were stories about Puffy, and he was never very popular in the hip hop game. If you were someone that took the art form seriously, nobody really liked Puffy. You know, he had all this power and he was everywhere. He was always prominent, but he was a very lame rapper. He wasn't even a proper producer. He was an executive producer who would tell the real producers and engineers what to do. But for some reason, he just rose to such incredible dominance in the industry. So obviously he was getting help from higher ups in the industry. And obviously he'd been selected as a chosen one for some reason. But it's quite frustrating that he's been getting away with so much for 30 years or more. And it's only now that his chickens are coming home to roost, it seems. It's great to see, as long as this isn't just theatre for the masses, and as long as this is actually going to go somewhere. Because my biggest fear is that he's just going to walk away. How do you feel this is going to pan out?
I agree with you that he was a chosen one. What has worked against him, in my opinion, would just be the evil accident of time. And people have gotten older. And when I say people, I mean specifically, we used to have BMG, Bertelsmann Music Group, or Bertelsmann Music Group. And inside of BMG was Arista. And who was running Arista was Clive Davis.
Clive Davis.
And where was Bad Boy? Bad Boy was after Uptown Records, where I believe Puffy got his start, just as like an intern or something. And then so it's another company in between Uptown.
Under Andre Harrell.
Yeah. And then Bad Boy is housed right inside of the BMG building in Times Square. So Clive, of course, was in his prime at that time. He had huge artists. I mean, the biggest names ever. So whatever Puffy was into at that time, I would guess he was already doing with a lot of higher ups anyway. And they saw that, this is all speculation, of course, that he would play ball. Like he could be admitted to some of these private whatever they had going on. And so, yeah, he rose fast. He had money behind him. That was no small thing to be housed inside of BMG. And now Clive, some of the people who would have been in a position not only to stop a train wreck, but even to guide him, even to say, hey, dude, you're out of control. You're getting too big for your britches. Like there was no one, it seems, to rein him in. And there definitely was no one to pull the feds off of him once Cassie did her lawsuit and all the dominoes fell from there. It seems that he has been on his own and he has had no handlers. It seems like he's been his own handler and is surrounded by yes people and the people that he's paying off. And this is what he is when left to his own devices. But it is disheartening, but also I think it's overdue and everything needs to be cleaned out so we can get back to the art form itself, because now hip hop has been dominated by these people and people who have been taken advantage of through the years.
Right. And it seems every now and again they'll throw one of their own under the bus. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking of R. Kelly from your hometown there in Chicago. A few years ago, R. Kelly got thrown to the dogs. He'd been embroiled in all kinds of unsavory stuff. He was accused of running basically a sex sort of harem, like mind control cult, with all these women that were kept captive. And R. Kelly, faced justice for what he'd done. His past caught up with him. And like Puffy, he'd been up to that stuff for decades. And those of us that were part of the scene had been hearing stories about R. Kelly for years. So maybe Puffy's time has come in the same way that R. Kelly's did. And as you say, it's well overdue.
Yeah, and R. Kelly is very similar to Puffy, because R. Kelly was brought to justice before this last time, and he paid off the witnesses. He intimidated witnesses and he was found not guilty before. So until that documentary came out, and then we had a new state's attorney, we had a new state's attorney and other things, and they found other ways to convict him. And so he also was extremely arrogant and just doing it right in plain sight, inviting people over to those parties and everything else. And that seems exactly what has happened to Puffy, only there may not have been a first time. Now, I want to just go back really quick. One point I forgot to say is that when Puffy was filing suit against those liquor companies, what did he say in those lawsuits? He said that they were treated, it was racism where these deals that he got, like he was complaining that he was being discriminated against and taken advantage of for being Black to these liquor companies. So of course, that's something the community is going to get behind. So these people are master manipulators. So now that was enough for the conspiracy theories now to say, oh, this is only happening to him because he challenged those liquor companies. And I do not think that that's what is behind this.
Puffy's name used to come up a lot in the wake of the notorious B.I.G. murder, Biggie Smalls, back in 97. And also, interestingly, he's named 77 times in the official Tupac Shakur murder documents. So many feel that he would have been implicated somehow in the murder of Tupac.
Yeah, and I remember when you said a few minutes ago, when you were saying that he wasn't an MC or anything with any particular talent. He was actually a dancer. He was a dancer before he became an executive, a rapper, and all of that. And he used to be, it used to be very gratuitous of him when he would appear in people's videos, the way Suge Knight described it.
Right.
So, and everyone has long suspected that he had something to do with Tupac's murder. And I just have I don't think I realized until this whole thing exactly how much interaction and friendship there was between Pac and Biggie, and then you have Puffy, you have Suge. Like, I don't think I realized all the inner workings of their relationship before.
Yeah. Puffy's rhymes seem to consist of, yeah, that's right, bad boy, bitch, take that, take that, take that. And that's about it. So no real rapper there. Puffy's father, Melvin Combs, was a gangster. He was like a small-time hood. And he worked for Frank Lucas, who was the character portrayed by Denzel Washington in American Gangster. And Melvin Combs was found shot dead in his car when Puffy was, I think he was about 5 years old, something like that. So in later interviews, Puffy said that he had his father's spirit, his hustler's spirit. And that's what pushed him on in the world of business to try and be successful and dominant in the way that he was. So not the best of starts in life, really.
Yeah, and I just don't believe anything that he says or his mother say. So I don't know if you've had a chance to look into that or not to fact check it, because I heard a story where he didn't even know who his father was until he was much, much older, before his mother finally told him who his father was. Because and I'm sure you've seen his mother, and I wouldn't believe anything that comes out of her mouth. She is she is so low and disgusting. Did you see the video of them both having an IV? And they both look totally hungover from the night before. She looks like she indulges. Oh, you haven't seen that? I'll have to send that to you. But she looks like she indulges just as much as he does. And in this video, he says, "Oh yeah, I'm here chilling with Ma Dukes." And my mom, and he says she's single. My mother is single. And she said that she could still bend over and touch the floor with her palms flat to like the people on Instagram.
Wow.
So she is extremely disgusting and not a good figure. So I don't know what kind of upbringing and values he could possibly have been raised with. I would say absolutely none. And I'll also say, and not just with him not being a good rapper and stuff, he's not even attractive. I've never thought Puffy P Diddy was ever attractive at all. He looks like there's something wrong with him. And the fact that him and his crew have to spike women's drinks, because you have in those industry parties, everybody used to go to parties, but to imagine that your self-esteem is so low, or you're just a psychopath, that you would take a woman's choice away from her by spiking her drink. And that's how he's been able to get close to these people, because they wouldn't normally probably even be attracted to him.
Right. And it was so obvious from early on that Puffy is either bisexual or just totally gay. You know, the warning signs were all there to anyone that was paying attention. And it's all coming out now that, you know, basically he's not fussy who he gets down with at these freak-offs. But another thing was that he always would wear dark glasses. It's very rare that you would actually see a picture of him with his eyes. And when you look at his eyes, they just seem to be so soulless. They're psychopathic. And it's almost as if he knows that they are, which is why so often he wears dark glasses and has done for years.
I agree. And in his very, very early years, he did not wear those glasses. And then, yes, his eyes just he just has this blank look there. He doesn't look sincere. It doesn't, even in that video that he released where did that halfway apology after the Cassie video came out of the hotel assault, and he was trying to act like he was sorry, and he didn't even look sincere in that video. He absolutely looks soulless to me, and you would have to be soulless to drug and beat people, force them into all kind of heinous acts. And I mean, you could not have a conscience at all.
Absolutely. And what you were saying there about his upbringing and his strange relationship with his mother and such, it reminded me of the stories that I heard about Malcolm McLaren when I was doing some research on him years ago. Malcolm McLaren died in 2010. And he was formerly the manager of the Sex Pistols and the New York Dolls, but he also dabbled in hip-hop culture in the 80s. And this brings a nice segue into Afrika Bambaataa, because McLaren worked with him. Bambaataa did a record with John Lydon, Johnny Rotten of the Sex Pistols, curated by Malcolm McLaren. McLaren had the world-famous Supreme Team, and that was connected with Bambaataa. And they just had a working relationship. And I've just heard stories about how McLaren was raised by his grandmother in a very bohemian sort of open house where all kinds of lovies and writers and poets and homosexuals would come in and share beds with each other. Malcolm used to share a bed with his grandmother when he was a teenager. And I just remember thinking, what does that do to somebody? How does someone turn out in adult life when that's been their upbringing? So you find these stories with so many of these famous people. But as I say, this does bring us into Bambaataa. And here we are, what is it now? 8 years on from when those allegations were first leveled against him by these two guys, Ronald B. Stinger Savage and Hassan Poppy Campbell. Am I correct in thinking that Ronald Savage has withdrawn his allegations against Bambaataa now?
Yes, Ronald Savage recanted about 2 or more years ago and said that he lied about his age and that he had a fake ID. Like, it's a very strange recanting that he did, and he's been holding firm to that. But there are also recordings of him being the Zulu Nation trying to bribe him. And then he finally had a chance to meet with Afrika Bambaataa, and he apologized to Bambaataa for coming out with these allegations. And Ronald Savage has been on a mission to try to clear Afrika Bambaataa's name. However, he is the only person who has recanted. Hassan Campbell has not recanted. There is a John Doe who is suing Afrika Bambaataa under the Child's Victim Act for abusing him as a child. He has not recanted, and neither has anyone else. Now, when you talk about the upbringing of some of these people, it made me think of Afrika Bambaataa's upbringing, where he was almost like a recluse inside of Bronx River housing, and his mother, he shared an apartment in housing with his mother, and so which was a working woman, and so she would be off at work and he would stay inside on the first floor and play music out of the apartment window into the courtyard. And he's young at this time, but some of the older, from what I understand from my interviews, older like drug addicts, heroin addicts, used to go in there and like hang out in his apartment, getting high and whatever else. And that there's rumors that there were older people who were abusing him when he was underage. So yes, what kind of effect does that? So there we have the music, we have drugs, and we have alleged abuse that seems to have continued all the way until the latest person that I know of. It would be in the mid teens of like 2013 or 15. Mm-hmm.
You did get your documentary film out there, Trapped in a Culture, right? That did get out?
Well, I released the interview footage only. So we had no takers on the film. Everybody that we shopped it to passed on it. So what I did was there was such a public interest that I released the interview footage because everybody just wanted to get to the bottom of this. So I made it available like on my YouTube channel for free.
Sure. Did that include the interview with TC Islam?
Yes, we do have the interview with TC in there, where he's telling us about the debauchery that he said the Zulu Nation was into, running drugs, guns. They wanted to start an all-female chapter so they could get into the prostitution business, which leads credence to the John Doe lawsuit, because the John Doe is alleging that he was 12 years old when Bambaataa was selling him to other degenerates for money, for them to adult men to take advantage of a 12-year-old boy. So all these things are from the very, very beginning of hip hop. And for some of these people, like during hip hop's 50th, which was great. I mean, we all are fans of hip hop. That is not what I'm saying here. But what I am saying is for these people to try to act like hip hop is some kind of religious experience, and like KRS-One actually has the temple of hip hop, a scripture, it's just really, when they've all been complicit, including KRS-One, of knowing about a lot of things and never saying anything, and attacking victims when they do come forward.
And just for the listeners' reference, TC Islam was murdered in the street in Atlanta a short while after speaking to you for this documentary, right?
Yeah, he was murdered 3 weeks after our interview, and he was the international spokesman of the Universal Zulu Nation, which is a group Afrika Bambaataa founded which started as some kind of hip hop awareness group, but eventually turned into a religious cult. And TC had come after the story broke in 2016. TC came out because he knew Hassan and Ronald Savage, and he came out on their behalf. And he was also very upset with Afrika Bambaataa. So there was this huge public fallout because TC wanted the money back that he invested in the group, because he didn't join the Zulu Nation for it to turn into a sex cult or a religious cult.
Right. So Bambaataa's still walking around a free man. Not only that, but he's still getting booked by event promoters. I think overseas, he's still getting booked to appear at events and such. And this is incredible, because if I equate this situation with, for example, Gary Glitter. So Gary Glitter was a pop star out of the UK in the 1970s. He was big in the glam rock era. He had loads of hits. And many, many years later, he was convicted of pedophilia, several counts of it, found guilty, jailed, and his name became dirt. He was basically scrubbed from the musical history books as if he'd never existed. You would never hear a Gary Glitter record on the radio ever again. So I just wonder why the same sort of thing is not happening with these guys. I mean, admittedly, Bambaataa's not been convicted of anything. He's been accused of it, but never convicted. But it's just incredible to me that so many hip hop heads are just giving him a pass and still revering him and putting him up on a pedestal as this demigod of the art form. You know, are they not aware of what he's being accused of, or do they think he's innocent, or is there just a lot of cognitive dissonance going on? It's a very strange thing.
Well, I think that there are people in the Zulu Nation who themselves are invested in the group, and it is in their best interest that it looks like he's been cleared of these charges. And just for your listeners, Afrika Bambaataa, this lawsuit was filed in 2021, and he has not responded to the case. And the attorney has asked the judge several times for the default judgment. And the cases in New York are just extremely backed up. So that judgment has not come down yet. But what has happened is the Zulu Nation has tried to stage an Afrika Bambaataa comeback, starting with this 2-year-old recanting of Ronald Savage. AllHipHop.com published this as if it was breaking news. And then Bambaataa was spinning at a park in the Bronx, all of this within a 10-day period. And then Funkmaster Flex went on the radio in New York and said that Afrika Bambaataa was cleared of being a pedophile because of the recanting of Ronald Savage. That's not an exact quote, but that's the bottom line of what he was saying. So our organization, Hip Hop Stands with Survivors, filed a complaint with the FCC against Hot 97 and Funkmaster Flex for actually going on airwaves that we pay for to try to clear a man who has not responded to this case. No one else has recanted. And yes, they all are invested in the history of the Zulu Nation because there's a hip hop museum and all of this. So they are trying to actively clear his name, but the public is not going to just sit by and allow them to do that. But I don't know if it's so much that they are revering him at this point or protecting their own interest in the history of the Zulu Nation. Because with him getting flushed, that there goes the Zulu Nation as well.
Right. I love the fact also that Bambaataa's real name used to be listed on Wikipedia as Kevin Donovan. And then your research uncovered that his real name was actually Lance Taylor. And then the listing miraculously changed overnight.
Yeah. And I don't, Afrika Bambaataa, I believe that person, Kevin Donovan, was an actual person or something who worked on a record or was a producer. He could have been like an engineer at a studio. Like it was just a name of a person. And I don't know how it got assigned to Bambaataa. But what I will say is that he has a number of alias names. And he is, from what I understand, spending a lot of time in the UK. I wouldn't be surprised if he's spending a lot of time where KRS-One, I don't know if KRS-One still lives in Liverpool, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's over there somewhere as well. He's 65 now. I don't think he's 67. 65, I believe. He's 65 years old, and it will be extremely disappointing if he's allowed to pass away without this being resolved. And the other thing is that in the case of Sean Combs, it was such a huge deal. It's a modern story, meaning like the Bambaataa is a historic case. This is a current case. And I just don't know if law enforcement, because there is no statute of limitations federally when it comes to child sex trafficking, or any kind of sex trafficking, which is why they are able to arrest Sean Combs. But in the case of Bambaataa, the public cannot make the U.S. attorney do anything. Like, you cannot make them investigate. You can't make them arrest anybody. You can go to the state or the city where the statute of limitations has run out. But what makes the U.S. attorney want to actually investigate Afrika Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation? So from what I understand, I mean, I've seen no indication that he's being investigated at all criminally. And so all the public has is this civil case, which he has not responded to, and it's just sitting there waiting for a default judgment. But the Zulu Nation's tentacles have been around for years, and the Bronx borough president gave the museum $1 million, even after all about the stuff we've exposed about that museum and their relations with the Zulu Nation. So we don't know if there could be a mole inside of the courthouse that's keeping the case, at the bottom of the stack. I will say that New York State passed some legislation because all of the courts are so backed up. I don't know. This new legislation is supposed to help the backlog somehow. So it is a chronic problem. So I haven't given in totally to the conspiracy theory of a mole being in there, but it's just an all around frustrating situation. And one more thing, Mark, if you'll just allow me, is that so the R. Kelly, when you look at these cases, the Me Too movement, the Harvey Weinsteins, so there you have Hollywood actresses, okay? Then you have R. Kelly, and he's this sexy singer. And now you have P. Diddy Combs, and you have Cassie and freak-offs. Like, there's all this, but when you have the Afrika Bambaataa case, you're now talking about poor Black and brown males who were underage when they were abused. And so it's not sexy. It has no sex appeal. And that's part of the issue, I believe, with the, not just like why the documentary didn't get picked up, but also the media coverage, which there is none. This story has never made it past the biggest network was Fox 5 in New York, like a news station. It never made it to CNN or anywhere else, and I believe it's just because it's just not sexy enough.
Yeah. Again, you make some very good points. And it's very frustrating for me when I will mention Bambaataa's name in a public talk or a presentation or something, and then people come up to me and say, "Who's that guy? Africa who?" And I'm like, "Afrika Bambaataa, he's one of the founding fathers of hip hop culture." And people are like, "Oh, right, okay, never heard of him." And, Bambaataa is up there with Kool Herc and Grandmaster Flash as one of these legendary icons of the scene. It's kind of like what Kenny Rogers is to country music, or, Muddy Waters is to blues. That's how big this guy is in the culture. And yet people that don't care for hip hop and never listen to rap music just don't seem to know who he is. So he's flying under the radar in many ways because people just don't care about this music and this art form.
Yeah, and it is unfortunate. And the Zulu Nation has chapters, or they used to before 2016. They had chapters all around the world and a huge presence in the United Kingdom. So that is amazing. Excuse me. That is amazing that you would have everyday people who don't know who he is. But if they're not into hip hop, I could see why.
Right.
Excuse me, Mark. Sorry about that.
No problem.
But I wanted to say that the Zulu Nation continues to have this fallout which is under the radar because you have the Bambaataa supporters and the people who don't care whether he did it or not. And then you have the other people who say, we still love hip hop, but we're not standing next to a potential child molester. So there's chapters in Germany, in London, in France. It's not that they're all still active, but everybody's trying to document the history now, kind of after the 50th anniversary. So there's a lot of under the radar internal push and pulls going on when it comes to documenting the history of hip hop. I would go so far to say that as far as American books go, I don't think any of them are factual when it comes to Afrika Bambaataa and the Zulu Nation. What has been done is they've been promoting the Zulu Nation's version of hip hop history, which is, of course, they exaggerate their own and Bambaataa's own role in hip hop.
There is a name which links Bambaataa, P Diddy, and also R. Kelly, who we mentioned. And he's also been embroiled in his own personal scandal and allegations. And that is the British hip-hop DJ Tim Westwood, who for many years I used to look up to as a kind of role model when I knew no better. But I've been doing some digging into this guy and his true nature. And he's basically the gatekeeper for the UK hip-hop scene, has been for decades. If you want to be successful in Britain as a rap act, you basically have to go through Westwood, or used to have to. So in 2022, a number of women came forward and accused Westwood of having sexually molested them, in many cases when they were minors. One was as young as 14, she claimed. And he became the subject of a BBC documentary, and apparently in the wake of this, there was an investigation by the BBC, so that'll go well then, who employed him for nearly 20 years on BBC Radio 1, and the Metropolitan Police in London. That was April 2022, when Westwood was forced to step down from his Capital radio show, Capital Extra. So it's 2.5 years later, and precisely nothing has been heard further in this case. Apparently the investigations are ongoing. Apparently somewhere in excess of £3 million has been spent on the investigation, but still there's no result and no sign of one anytime soon. So these allegations and these activities seem to be absolutely everywhere in this culture, in this business. And as I say, it's interesting that Westwood was a close personal friend of Bambaataa. I've got a piece of footage of when Bambaataa appeared on Westwood's radio show years ago. And Bambaataa says, do you trust me? Do you trust Tim Westwood? And then they just fall about laughing in front of the camera. So I think there's probably a hidden message there. And Westwood used to be a close personal friend of Puffy, Sean Combs. They used to party together. Westwood was flown out to R. Kelly's studio in Chicago many years ago and spent time hanging out with him. So we start to see some patterns emerging here in terms of what all these people are embroiled in, the allegations against them. It just seems to be one big, sick, diseased industry. So what do you know about Westwood?
Yeah. Are you saying the £3 million investigation is the BBC doing an investigation, or it's the law enforcement? I just want to
that's the BBC. So a lot of people were upset at the fact that over here in the UK we're forced to pay a license to watch BBC TV programs. It's an extortion racket, and people were annoyed that £3 million worth of taxpayers' money, license payers' money, had been used in this investigation, and there's still no results from it after 2.5 years.
Okay. That's amazing about Westwood and Sean Combs and R. Kelly. And thank you for that information on Afrika Bambaataa. Another disturbing link with Westwood was a group in the UK called London Posse. And Westwood produced their album. I believe they only had one album.
Yeah, this was Rodney P. and his crew.
Yeah, Rodney P. And the beatbox person, his name was Sifo or Sipo. I don't know how they pronounce that. I say CFO, that could be wrong. But so CFO and Rodney P and other people from the UK spent time with Afrika Bambaataa in the Bronx, in Bronx River. And this would be in the mid 1980s. I have a lot of information from the UK that I'm still going through, but this will just be an overview because I don't have all the details. And then they spent a lot of time with some kind of festival or big concert in like 1984 or 1985 in London. And
Oh, yeah. I think that was
is,
the South Bank Centre in London. That would have been 1984. And that's when
yeah.
Bambaataa came over to London and Tim Westwood curated that event.
Yes, that would have been it. And London Posse was there. And so CFO later on, so that was 84. And then in 2004, CFO took his own life. And there has been, I haven't found anyone, and I did speak to, we had an exchange, we weren't on the phone, in written forms, and to Rodney P. And so there's speculation that because they spent time with Afrika Bambaataa, it's almost like assumed something happened, and CFO would have been underage at that time. But Rodney P. told me that CFO had never disclosed that anything happened, and then other people in the UK swear it did. So we don't have any confirmation. But there's a video of Westwood driving CFO and another guy, I believe his name is Bionic, in the car in London. And yeah, and so here's this close connection with Afrika Bambaataa. And a woman who I interviewed is from Child USA. She's a child advocate and an attorney, Marcy Hamilton. And I interviewed her. And what she said was that pedophiles have a secret universe, but it's right out in the open. Like they have a secret universe that the rest of us don't see, but they see each other, and they have these symbols, they have this language, they have these inside jokes, and that's how they link up with each other to share victims, share pornography, and all of these things. So in the music business or any business, you would imagine you meet a lot of people in your business and radio and everything else. But when you see who ends up linking up with who, it's usually not an accident, in my opinion. So that's all very disturbing about Bambaataa and Westwood and R. Kelly and Puffy. It's just all very sick.
Yeah. It will be very interesting to see where all this goes, because I personally never thought I'd see the day when Puffy would get arrested. It just looked to me like, even in spite of all these crazy claims against him and all these stories we were hearing, he was so high level protected and connected that nothing would ever happen to him. So I was quite surprised when he was arrested. Obviously, it remains to be seen whether he's going to go to jail or whether he's going to walk free, but I still never thought I'd see the day. I wonder if you're correct in that Puffy was pretty much a lone operator, sort of, with his own agenda, rather than being instructed in these activities from people higher up the pecking order.
Yeah, I would also say that that he's in custody in a federal institution, and those are the feds that are after him. And I believe their clearance rate, meaning their success rate in convicting people that they arrest, is over 95%. I wouldn't be surprised if he started negotiating a plea deal in this situation. And no, I think that he probably has newer partners, more of his contemporary age in this whole thing, but I wouldn't think that he had any guidance whatsoever from anyone higher up than him. I think he has been left to his own devices, and that this is what we have. I am glad for this day, because a lot of people are connected to Puffy, and everybody wanted to be at his parties. And we haven't even scratched the surface yet of the big, all the names that will come out. If he doesn't take a deal and ends up really going to trial, there will be a lot of things that come out in the wash during that trial. But if he takes a plea, we may never hear those names. Another attorney that I heard him giving an interview, and he said, you want to know why there aren't more arrests right now? Because for RICO charges, you have to have more than one individual. And he said, more than likely, the reason there aren't more arrests right now is because everybody else, potential co-defendants, are all cooperating. So this will be very interesting as time goes on and things become more and more revealed. And unfortunately, it's made us have to revisit Kim Porter. Kim Porter, Puffy's former partner and the mother of his children, and her untimely demise, and that by pneumonia. And then there were other people who's rumored that she used to, when they were broken up, like some of her, and so when she would get with somebody else, her new boyfriend or whoever she was dating would die from pneumonia. So it's just like all these, I think he was up to more than these sex parties.
Yeah, well, there's a high body count around Puffy for sure. Mm-hmm. From, Biggie Smalls to Heavy D, Andre Harrell, Craig Mack, Black Rob, quite a few others.
Yeah.
Not the luckiest guy to hang around.
Yeah. Yeah, we're fortunate that we weren't in there. And did you see that a lot of celebrities have scrubbed their Twitter accounts, all the ones that used to praise him and the great work he's doing in the community and Black excellence and all that stuff, and they've been taking down all their tweets. And from what I understand, Jay-Z has. Usher claims his account was hacked, but there's a number of them who've all been scrubbing their Twitter accounts.
Yeah. Cancel the laxative order.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Another name that has emerged in the wake of all of this as well, who's been very big for the past several years, is Drake. So there are allegations being leveled at Drake, not least by Kendrick Lamar, in a lot of the stuff he's been saying in his track Not Like Us and many of his social media comments. So Drake is emerging as a kind of smaller scale version of Diddy in terms of what he's being accused of being into, possibly similar types of operations. He's got a big mansion just outside Toronto there. I wonder if Drake is quietly crapping himself behind closed doors. Do you have anything on the Drake situation there?
I don't. I did recently hear about these allegations about Drake, but no, I haven't had a chance to look into them. I don't know. Well, I understand that he's from and his mansion's in Canada, but did any of the debauchery happen on this side of the border? And so then that would bring in the United States. So no, I haven't. I don't know anything just yet about Drake.
Yeah. I mean, I don't care for Drake's so-called music. It's not my thing. He's basically an actor. Aubrey Graham is his real name, and he started out as an actor before he emerged as Drake. It's almost as if it's an invented persona, and he was inserted into the hip-hop business to become the biggest rapper. Imagine that, Drake being the biggest rapper. An art form has gone down the toilet when that is the cream of the crop in terms of mainstream output. It's pretty tragic.
Yeah, it is. And I remember watching some kind of program, like it wasn't Law and Order, but some kind of program like that. And Drake did like this cameo to visit this little girl in a hospital. And I was just like, are you guys kidding? They just are going to make you accept these people or like them, and just because they just put them everywhere.
That's right. But some people just seem totally untouchable. You mentioned Clive Davis earlier, and he seems like a guy who is going to pass away peacefully in his sleep one night, and he's never going to be brought to task for some of the stuff that he's apparently been into. He's very, very high up in the hierarchy, it would seem.
Oh, yeah. When Clive, whenever that day comes, I'm sure there will be tributes and everything all around. And I've never heard anyone publicly accuse him of anything. It's just all these hushed talks and things when it comes to Clive. But yeah, I don't
Right.
think anybody's going to come forward on Clive Davis.
Yeah. How much do you know about Leor Cohen? He's known as the tall, dark Israeli who's dominated the business side of the hip hop industry for decades. He was head of Def Jam for years, and he just seems to have been presiding over all the big names in hip hop for the best part of the past 40 years. Very, very powerful figure within the industry. But I hear some stuff about him as well.
And he runs YouTube. like you can
Well, there is that, yeah.
Yeah. And during this Diddy situation, so some network was running old footage of Puffy introduced at a board meeting. It appears to be Bad Boy, or maybe it was I don't know, a television company. I don't know, but he's introducing this, you could tell it's some kind of board meeting of executives, and he's introducing Cassie to this group, and he's saying that and she's very talented, and he's trying to make a case on how talented she is, and that he wants this group to put their muscle behind her. That's not an exact quote. And so who's sitting at the table except Leor Cohen? Like in those early days of Cassie, he had just met her not too long before that. And there's Leor right at the table. And yeah, he has been a permanent fixture in hip hop, and Dame Dash gives him the business, but he's always holding court all over the place. And he openly says he doesn't care if he's promoting debauchery, if people are killing each other over rap music. I got a family to feed. He openly says that.
Right. I mean, I've got such mixed feelings about everything that's coming out now, and probably you do as well, because as former fans of the genre who really used to love hip hop culture, me personally, I did in the 90s, it's disappointing and it's disheartening to hear that many of these people aren't who you thought they were, and there were all these agendas that were going on behind the scenes. But I guess there's also an element of satisfaction that so much of it is now coming to the surface, because if it's been happening, if it's been going on, people need to know about it. It needs to be exposed. And it does seem like so much of this stuff that has been behind closed doors for so long is now coming out for whatever reason, whether it's in a controlled manner or whether it's leaking out by accident. Either way, people are being forced to confront the truth about the very ugly side of this business. And I guess we should be grateful for that.
And you know what else? It's a great time for younger artists, okay? People who are just starting out. And these people have all been gatekeepers. And if you didn't go through their doors and participate with what they wanted you to do, and even keep participating in what they wanted you to do, that would be the end of your career. And at the same time, these gatekeepers are coming down, and time has got the best of them, and people are passing away, or they won't be here for much longer. You have all these individual platforms. When I say individual, independent is what I mean. There's all these independent platforms for younger artists to stream their music, to sell their music, and then maybe they won't have to go through these same problems as the people who paved the way had to go through. So it is sad for us, and for us who've been around and fans and of the genre and that kind of thing. But I don't know if there's too many people left that I'm a fan of anymore. I love the music, but I like now we have we're just, the rose colored glasses have long been removed. But I do think it's a great time, and maybe women and underage people won't be abused in the music industry anymore, because again, they have escaped the Me Too movement, and there needs to be checks and balances in place. There needs to be mandatory reporters when it comes to underage kids. Like, how did Justin Bieber go into Puffy's and Usher under his jurisdiction for that amount of time? And
Right.
The house and the maids and all those people should be mandatory reporters, meaning when a child is in your vicinity and you're supposed to protect them, and if something happens, you are obligated to report it to the authorities immediately. So these children had no one looking out for them at all.
Yeah.
So hopefully that will come to an end.
Just seems like Justin Bieber was passed around the industry like some kind of rag doll, just from person to person and getting abused the whole time from stuff that we're seeing coming out now. And just going back to Puffy, presumably it's going to be quite a dangerous scenario if he does go to jail in terms of the information that he must have on so many people and presumably video recordings, footage of some very prominent people in compromising positions at his freak-offs, at his parties. If he really is the Jeffrey Epstein of hip-hop, as we're hearing that he has been, then a lot of very powerful people are going to be very worried about stuff that may come out about them. So I wonder how that's going to end up. I hope P Diddy didn't kill himself doesn't become a popular internet meme.
I don't know about the Jeffrey Epstein case, about this aspect of it, but one thing about Puffy's case is that he actually has recordings of all those freak-offs. So it wouldn't even be smart for him to kill himself because the recordings are in the hands of the authorities and eventually they will make it out. So that wouldn't be smart. But another thing is even people who aren't as powerful, but just think of some uber macho masculine rapper who has participated in something sexual with him. And so those kind of people have inmates that they know, like they can get in touch with people. Somebody like that may not want to get outed by him. Like, yo, you lose my entire street cred out here, you know?
I'm hearing about a couple of very prominent names from the 90s going forward, or from the 80s going forward, who are in just that kind of position. Maybe I won't mention their names right now, but there's two names that spring to mind that it's been suggested that they've been into all kinds of stuff. And they both have very alpha male macho images, as all the rappers did in the 90s. But we hear that there was a lot of gay stuff going on. And back in the 90s, that was completely taboo within hip hop. It just wasn't accepted in the way that it is now. So as you say, there's a lot of artists with a lot of credibility and aspects of their image at stake if all this stuff gets out.
Yeah. I also am glad about the way that this is going, because if I could just be, this is just very sad, but these men who are living these double lives and everything, and then how incarceration has affected the Black community historically. And Black women had at one point were the highest group getting HIV. And it's not that I'm not trying to insinuate that you have to be gay to get HIV. That's not what I'm saying. But at a certain point, that was a big group that had it. And then Black women became the highest group that had it. And that is no secret on why. So a lot of these people have been living these double lives, and the women and the family have been the ones suffering for it. And so I'm actually really glad about this for a lot of reasons. The reason it took, I'll go back to the beginning of our conversation, this long for hip hop to come front and center is because of the whole Black man thing. You're going to tear a Black man down. And it took somebody like Cassie to strike that, throw the first punch. Yeah.
All right, Leila. Well, you made some great points there, and it would be very interesting to see where all this goes. So we'll be keeping a close eye on things from week to week. But thank you for coming on today. Yeah. Do you want to point the listeners towards any of your work? Do you have any projects on the go at the moment, or any websites or any shows or anything you just want to promote there?
Yeah, they can, if they're interested in the Afrika Bambaataa story and footage, they can just go to my YouTube channel, which is under Leila Wills, and just watch the interviews for free. We stay on top of the John Doe case and other developments. And Mark, I would be honored if one day you would visit me on a live stream, to talk about Westwood and the UK and things like that. We want to get to know the UK a lot better and how it fits into this whole hip hop scene that we're seeing.
Yeah, that'd be great to do. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you so much for, having me and staying in touch all this time, and the work and research that you do. I know how much work goes into it, and all of us benefit from it. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you. We all help each other out, basically. We share information, and we're all aligned towards the same goals, I think, which is just exposing all this darkness and all this evil and all this debauchery, That's what we want at the end of the day. And if we can support each other along the way, then we'll do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on today.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
This is just a wrap. I'm picking up vibrations.